Okay, I'm ready to start. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Introductions first. My name's Adrian Hutton. I'm councillor and I'm chairing this panel this afternoon. Could I ask the other councillors to introduce themselves, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm Gary Coleman. I'm councillor for Brunswick Ward in Blackpool.
I'm Danny Scott. I'm a councillor for Warbrack Ward in Blackpool.
Could I ask the officers who are supporting the panel this afternoon to introduce themselves, please?
Hi, my name's Sarah Chadwick. I'm from Democratic Governance and I'll be taking the minutes of the meeting.
And I'm Sharon Davis from Legal Services.
All right, thank you. Could we ask the applicant to introduce themselves, please, and their representative?
Good afternoon, Chair. Mark Marshall, and to my left is the applicant. He's quite happy to be known as Kadish. I know him as Kadish. He's got a surname that's perhaps complex to pronounce easily, so I think for all parties, it can be known as Kadish.
All right, thank you for that. Could I ask the other officers present, the police and the licensing officer, please, to introduce themselves?
Yeah, Lee Petrak, Training Standards and Licensing Manager for Blackpool Council.
Nat Cox, I'm a licensing sergeant from Blackpool Police.
Right, thank you very much for all of that. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. I have to ask the councillors, do you have any declarations of interest regarding this meeting?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
And I don't either. Thank you very much for that. Right, procedure for the meeting. I know a lot of you will know this, but we'll go through it anyway. The applicant will present their case first. Then Lee Petrak will present the case for the authority, and the police will then go, well, no disrespect, but they'll go third. After each of the presentations, the other parties to the hearing can ask questions, as can members of the committee, and can the other officers present. Okay. Once we've dealt with all of the submissions, questions, we will ask the applicant and his representative and the police and Mr. Petrak to leave the meeting whilst we discuss it and come to a decision. That will be notified to the applicant and to Mr. Marshall and other interested parties within 5 working days. Okay, we've agreed that each of the parties will have 20 minutes to present their case, bearing in mind that we have all read all of the paperwork that's been submitted. Okay, and then we will have the 3 parties, Mr. Petrak, police and the applicant, will have 5 minutes to sum up, to cover anything that they wish to, but not to go into any new information. Okay, is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Right. In that case, then, and I understand, Mr. Marshall, that you're presenting the case. So,
yes, sir.
Would you like to present your case then, your applicant?
Okay, sir. So I'll just be sticking to the script that you've already had, the written submission, and I'll just abbreviate what you've already read. I don't intend to go through it line by line or word by word. So the first page just sets out the area and assessment of what's already there. Obviously, there's more on premises than there is off, but we're dealing with off premises. And this particular application is subject to a very stringent policy. So I did the assessment of the area and I've done a percentage of what we could potentially see in terms of late opening if the application is granted. So the figure I've worked out on the premises that I've looked at from the public register, all those premises have a closing time of midnight, which represents 71% of the premises in that area have a midnight close. If this one is granted, it'll move it very modestly to a 78% ratio. I've made the point in the following paragraphs that even though a lot of the premises close at midnight, and certainly I would be concerned if off licenses were open, how that could impact on people walking home from the pubs in the locality. You will note that most of the unlicensed trade have got midnight, and I've also made the point that those premises don't immediately kick out at midnight. We have this situation where they have a drinking up time. So we don't envisage there to be too many issues with people wandering home from the local establishments with the time that we've sought. And that has been intentional, really, to seek a midnight for that very reason. If we were looking at a 1 o'clock, which was the initial instructions, that would definitely be an issue, and I would think I'd even have more difficulty than I'm already having in trying to get this application across the line. So the assessment of the area is the predominant issue with off licenses in terms of the closing times is 11 o'clock. We do have the one up at number 3 Whitegate Drive that's got a midnight. I don't believe there's huge amounts of issues coming from that, if any. And we hopefully envisage that there'll be no issues in relation to the later closing at this premises. Again, on this page, I've linked a lot of the information to your policy, and I've tried to take the points in turn. Potential of the licensing objectives, we don't think is significant. If granted, the average terminal hours, I've already said, will move from 71% to 78%. And again, I make the point about the majority of the premises in the area having a drinking up time of 30 minutes. The operating schedule is also very robust at this establishment. And in the Appendix 1 that I submitted, which was the plan about what was going to happen with this application before we put it in, I've made reference to the licence being subject to a review back in 2014. The background with that was that Cadish actually inherited a car crash of a premises rather than him running it into the ground. There was a series of different owners that operated it very badly, and he took responsibility when he took that premises. So it's not that he's particularly a bad operator, but he did inherit it from a bad operator. But that resulted in some fairly robust conditions, more so than anything in the locality being put on the license. So we also say that this is another reassuring fact that the operating schedule has had a positive effect in addressing any problems that were there, because, as I say, he's traded since 2014 at the premises with little or no issues. Moving on to page 3 of the written submission, on the document that probably you have is a table that's got no details on, but on the restricted information I've put some financial figures in. I'm going to be quite cryptic in the way that I use these figures, because obviously it's being recorded, it's accessible to members of the public, and Cadish does not want his financial interests disclosing to anyone. So in terms of what we've got 2 temporary event notices which were done as a sample, really, to see what the volume of sales would be like. And again, moving back to the Annex 1, I think I envisaged a certain figure being achievable in that last hour, and it transpires that we're not even half of that figure. So I can mention this, that we potentially envisaged £500 worth of sales over the 2-week period. In fact, it was 218. You see the figures for yourself, and that sort of boils down to a fairly modest percentage in terms of the alcohol sales being around about 30%. My 33% is actually incorrect. I've redone the maths this morning. It's 31%. So we don't think that that 31% is going to be too much of a problem. You can see the sort of numbers in terms of monetary terms that are being sold, and you can see the value of the overall goods. So from a business decision point of view, it is a good one, because there is the potential for further income from this potential application if it's granted, but also there isn't the potential for a huge growth in alcohol sales. And that's what I wanted to get out of the temporary event notices, to give some reassurance that all of a sudden we're not going to be letting the genie out of a bottle and there'll be big problems. We do accept that temporary event notices, they're not advertised, so the pattern of trading won't really be embedded, but you can see the last hour between 10 and 11, and you could probably use that as a rule of thumb as to what we could expect in due course if the application is granted. So it's not going to be significant. So I've tried to give you as much detail as I can in relation to the figures, specifically into the hour at the end of the day rather than at the beginning of the day. I'll only address the beginning of the day through oral evidence from Cadish at the end of the submission. So that's the financial side of things. In terms of what it could mean to him as a business. There could be a potential upturn in turnover over a 12-month period of around about 4%. So that percentage really allows him not even to stand still. Bearing in mind the gas and electric costs at this premises have doubled, and also quite interestingly, one of the major suppliers who used to bring goods 3 times a week have now implemented a charge for delivery, which comes in at £5,000 for the year. So all businesses are struggling with costs, and Cadis is seeking to go about addressing those costs in the right and proper way. Within Annex Appendix 1, there is reference to a fair amount of investment that's gone into the premises. I'm sure when Sergeant Cox and Mr. Petrak give their address, they'll be able to confirm that it's high spec, it's had the spend, it's not someone that's promising to do something on the back of potentially getting something from you guys. He's already done it, and he's seeking to stay afloat as a business in the best way he knows how. I've made reference to previous decisions just by virtue of trying to find out where the bar lies in terms of exceptional circumstances. Each of the cases that have been granted, I've made mention to, are variations, and each are very different. Some hotels, one pub, one hotel. As I say, I will not regurgitate that because you've already read it. But the point I wanted to make out of this, it seems to me quite crucial that if you get a responsible authority objecting, it is quite difficult potentially to get through the policy. We accept and appreciate entirely the position that Mr. Petrak and Sergeant Cox are in terms of the objection submitted, but it's of note, I think, that there's no special detail within the objections. They are fairly generic in terms of their content, drawing your attention to the fact that there's a policy in place, and also drawing your attention to the fact that the onus is with me to prove that there will not be any issues. Hence, I've gone to a fair amount of effort to do as much research as possible. The research papers contained within your information pack are only there to show my workings out, rather than suggesting that I've made comments myself. I'm making reference to material that's already available out on the internet. There is a couple of cases that I wanted to highlight in terms of things that haven't necessarily received objections in the past, just to show some of the inconsistencies in the past. And again, this isn't to be critical because there's change of staff at the police quite recently. Some of these decisions may have rested with the previous people, but it does make it difficult from an applicant's point of view to understand what they would be looking for in terms of offers to negate the need for a policy objection. So I'll put 2 cases in that makes reference to that. Also, there's some case law, which I'm sure you've read, around how policies should be applied in terms of the flexibility. Your own report makes reference to that, so I don't need to regurgitate that particular issue. And also very much sympathising with the position of the committee when they do receive objections from responsible authorities. They are your experts. The guidance says that you should listen to them. And also, as I say, most authorities publicly declare support of their officers, and rightly so. So we do appreciate the decisions in the past and why they've been made. We also appreciate the position the responsible authorities find themselves in when there is a policy. There's lots of issues in Blackpool. So there's no grudge to be borne in terms of any objection submitted. The burden very much rests with me, and it is my job to demonstrate to you that there's not a problem. On page 10 of my written submission, there's a fairly interesting part of the policy, paragraph 4.17. And I've ticked each point because I believe with the written paperwork that's been submitted, we've discharged these particular steps. So the first one at paragraph 4.17 of the policy is the applicant has properly considered what is appropriate for the local area when considering what hours and activities to apply for. He's looked at the area, and as I said, there's 71% of the premises in the location have midnight. So he's not seeking to go against the grain of what's happening in the location. He's looked very closely at the potential impact of the licensing objectives. He believes it's not going to be significant. That's borne out by the temporary event notices that have been done, and also by the fact that he's traded in the location for 8 years. And the operating schedule demonstrates that the applicant is taking appropriate steps to minimise any adverse impact on local residents and businesses. So as I say, it does have a fairly robust operating schedule that seems to have been successful for the last 8 years, and there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to be so for the forthcoming future. Page 10 is just to skip through on risk assessments, and then we move on to page 11, which is a bit of a crime analysis, very crude crime analysis that's available on the internet, again, looking at Whitegate Drive as a whole. We have to say that we're only dealing probably with the top maybe 20% of Whitegate Drive, and a lot of these issues could be to do with the other areas. As I say, it's difficult to nail down in terms of granular detail as to where the crime is and what it is. What we can say is that it's not happening in or around the vicinity of the premises. The interesting thing I got out from this research was the comparison. So Talbot Ward in general, which is where the applicant sits, has got a huge diverse swing in terms of crime numbers. So if you look towards the C end of the ward, I won't mention any names of the streets, but one is used as a comparison within the written submission on page 13. The crime levels there are significantly higher, 3 times higher. And the point I wanted to make, which probably illustrates it most for those of you who know Blackpool, is Palatine Road. So you could be at the Whitegate Drive of Palatine Road and experience a very different environment than the C end of Palatine Road. It was always synonymous with certain issues at the C end of Palatine Road, the junction with Central Drive, and the two are very, very different. Page 14 just deals with, again, the risk assessment methodology, how we've approached it, what's likely to be a potential issue. I have to say that I was scratching my head to even think of issues, because at this particular premises, these things don't even happen. But looking worst case scenario, the potential for certain things have been added into the risk assessment and evaluated, and I come up with a fairly low risk score in relation to it. I think it's been done with thought and methodology. And quite a bit of research. So I've not made it up as I've gone along, even though I formed a judgment fairly early on that this area of Whitegate Drive at the sort of margins of Talbot Ward is far different to that of areas within Talbot Ward near the town centre. It's again incumbent on me to demonstrate that by way of evidence. So the research has been done to try and also support what I felt initially. By way of conclusion, the application does not wish to go against the grain of the policy. It's been tailored, in fact, to do the exact opposite. It's a community-based store with a loyal and diverse customer base. A significant investment in the store has enhanced the shopping experience and created a store that is a credit to the area rather than a blight. There's only 2 hours of trading have been analysed, which demonstrate that alcohol accounts for 31% of the total sales. I've also given some examples about how you can categorise what is alcohol-led and what isn't. At the very end of the conclusion on page 16, I've evidence will not be undermined, and if granted, we'll end up with 2 premises being off licences in the location, a fair distance apart, about 500 metres, with that midnight terminal hour. I wanted to bring Kadish in at the very end now, just to talk about the earlier hour of 7 a.m. And I feel the only issue that we could possibly think of in terms of licensing objectives is that of street drinking potentially. They are generally the only people who are purchasing alcohol, other than alcohol dependents, of course, at that time in the morning in this location. I do accept there's locations in Blackpool where things are still happening at 7 o'clock in the morning, following on from the night before, but Whitegate Drive certainly isn't one of those at this particular location. So we just ask you, Kadish, you've operated the store for 8 years, is that correct?
Yeah.
And whilst you've been there, do you work in the shop quite regularly?
Yeah, most of the time.
Okay. And in the mornings between 8 and 9, do you get any big demand for alcohol at the moment? How many people come in buying alcohol?
Not really much people, but I mean, the on and often people come into alcohol and they buy low piece and things. They want to buy a beer, but if an object there's some people like Mungin, why we can't sell it, but there's others who will sell it.
Okay,
And my point is,
that's fine. You've also lived in the area. And do you see any issues with street
No.
drinking or problems on the street at 7 in the morning?
no, I don't
No?
see any other people in the morning.
Okay.
Even I don't see anyone walking on the street. with
Okay,
a car.
so it's a quiet area at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Chair, that's it. I don't want to go over old ground. As I say, you've read everything all in advance. Thanks for that. So I'm hoping that deals with the written submission and the appendices submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Right. Mr. Petrak, do you have any questions to anything that Mr. Marshall said so far?
No, not specifically, Chair. I think Mr. Marshall's covered everything.
Okay. Sergeant Cox, do you have any questions to Mr. Marshall regarding the applicant's submissions?
No questions. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much for that then. Do members of the panel have any questions? Councillor Coleman?
No, I've no questions. Thank you, Chair. Just thank Mr. Marshall for for all the information he's given to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, do you have any questions? Councillor Scott?
No, Chair, I haven't.
Right, okay, thank you then. Right, in that case, can we go on to Mr. Petrak? It's your opportunity, Mr. Petrak, to present your objections.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't propose to keep the committee's time for very long. You'll have seen my written submission. It's extremely straightforward, well summarised by Mr. Marshall, in the sense that I'm drawing to your attention the fact that we have the existence of the policy, and that this application sits within that area. It is not a significant change to the policy, to the existing licence. Whether or not you feel as though this application is one where you want to divert from policy. So I don't have any specific anything specific to add other than that. I can confirm that we did, both myself and Sergeant Cox did undertake a visit to the premises with Mr. Marshall and Kadish on I think it was the 22nd of April. And the premises is, you can see the investment. It's evident that he's invested an awful lot of time and money into the premises. And it certainly in relation to the CCTV system, it is most definitely high spec. It's comfortably the best one that I've ever seen. So yeah, I mean, it is well set out. The only thing that I would say in relation to the information, this additional information provided by Mr. Marshall, and this may well not impact your decision making criteria. However, just in relation to I think the previous applications, I've checked my records. I think the applications specifically that are referred to in relation to Mardi Gras, the Lawton and the Beachfield and the Barons, I think the information in the report suggests they are in the policy area when in fact they're not. So that was just one to note. So that would be a reason why there were no policy objections raised, because we couldn't have done. So that's just more for everyone's information. But yeah, in relation to the application itself, and the visit that we conducted, then I have no specific. I can't stand here today and say that there are specific concerns that I've got about the application because I don't have any.
Okay, right. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Do you have any questions to Mr. Petrak on anything that he's said so far?
No, sir.
Right. Thank you. Do members of the committee, Mr. Councillor Coleman, do you have any questions to Mr. Petrak?
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Scott, do you have any questions to Mr. Petrak?
No, I have no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. Right, in that case then, it's over to you, Sergeant Cox, to put the police point of view.
Thanks, Chair. To be fair, our objection is extremely similar to the case that's been outlined by Mr. Petrak. Having viewed the premises, it was run to a very high standard for what we could tell. Certainly, we had no concerns in relation to any compliance with the licence. We were shown everything that we were requested to be shown. It's purely that obviously it falls within the area of the cumulative impact policy. Therefore, we're obliged to object effectively. I suppose the ultimate question would be, is it proven itself to be outstanding enough to divert away from the policy? And obviously, that's a question for yourself and the panel. There's nothing I can draw your attention to specifically about this premises, certainly that's relevant in the recent time frame. I think Mr. Marshall's referred to historic issues there. I believe it failed a test purchase, but it's a number of years ago. In relation to recent interactions with ourselves, there isn't anything of note that I can bring your attention to.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant Cox. Mr. Marshall, sorry, I had a complete blank there. Mr. Marshall, do you have any questions to Sergeant Cox?
It's only one, sir, and I think it makes it refers to this particular issue within Appendix 2. It's only because Sergeant Cox mentioned a test purchase failure. I think that's going to be back in 2014. And I haven't had clarification on this particular issue, and perhaps Mr. Petrak can come in just to clarify one way or another. But Kadish tells me there was a successful test purchase shortly after the visit on the 22nd of April. We didn't have any written confirmation of this, but I think verbal confirmation. So I'll just, if we could get that clarified, whether the applicant did successfully pass one in mid to late April, just because it was raised by Sergeant Cox, just so you've got some reassurance that everything is as it should be as we speak today.
Okay, thank you. At that point then, can we just ask Mr. Petrak to clarify the position regarding the test purchase on the 22nd of April?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got that information in front of me. What I can do, my gut feeling is that I think that Mr. Marshall may well be right, but I'll need to check with colleagues what the date of that test purchase was and what the product tested was. But I can do that. Are you happy for me to email that to the respective parties when I've found the answer to that? I can do that as soon as I've got the answer.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do you want me
please.
to email it direct to you, Chair? And Mark, do you want me to email that to you as well?
Perhaps if I could just change the question, it might just rectify the issue. It's probably fair to say if there was a failure, I dare say it would have been in your objection. And bearing in mind that it isn't in your objection, I think it's fair to assume that there was a pass rather than a fail.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Chair, I don't need any more clarification than that. That's fine.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshall. I was going to ask exactly the same question, that if there'd been a failure, I'm sure we would have known about it. But so we'll assume from that point that the test purchase was a success. Okay, thank you for that. Right, do members of the panel have any questions to Sergeant Cox? I think that's where we are now.
Yeah.
Not from me, Chair, thank you.
None from me, Chair, thank you.
Right. Okay, so if there's no further questions for anything, we've dealt with the applicant, we've dealt with the council representative, we've dealt with the police. There's been no further questions. In that case, we come to the summing up, and we go in reverse order for this. Sergeant Cox, is there anything you want to sum up on?
No, Chair, thank you. It's as per my original submission.
Right, thank you very much. Mr. Petrak, is there anything you want to sum up on?
No, there isn't, Chair. There's nothing more that I can add.
Right, thank you. In that case, Mr. Marshall, it's your opportunity to sum up. You've got 5 minutes, but as you know, I always say it, you don't have to take the 5 minutes if you don't need it. Okay.
No, I won't. Yes, I won't, Chair. Thank you. So this has been a very difficult case in terms of the research and what we've had to look into. And I've obviously got things wrong in terms of the chronology of cases. But suffice to say, I read every single one over the last 3.5 years. So I know what information has been before you and whether the quality's been there to depart from your policy. And looking at those previous applications, you know, there's not one decision I would disagree with. This is why I've tried to make this a standout application, because you do need to hang your hat on something that goes over and above, demonstrates to you that there isn't going to be an issue, and that's backed up with evidence and research, and that's what I've tried to do. In short, this policy is a robust policy, and so it should be. But this application, for my money, is in the right place. It's asking for the right things in terms of the hours. It's not seeking to go too far. And the activity is going to just be the sale of alcohol, which is a small activity when you look at the overall sales of other goods that take place in this store. It will give the applicant a fighting chance to stand still financially. He's certainly not going to get in front, bearing in mind the pressures and costs on business at this moment in time. As I say, it probably relates to about a 4% increase in turnover overall. And depending on which news reports you listen to, public sector pay increases are looking at a 4% increase, private sector 8%. But then the next news report you listen to, public sector is minus 4%. And business is 4%. So statistics and figures are very difficult, and it's a moving feast when everything is moving up and down. But this applicant is seeking to do things properly. He's done it first rather than promising you things that may come tomorrow. This man has actually done it. He's spent the money, and he's seeking to look at expanding his business potential by a modest extension in hours, 1 hour at the end of the day and 1 hour at the beginning of the day. And I would say that this application will not impact on the licensing objectives in the area that it's in. And that's the key thing. It's the right area, and this is the right application.
Okay, then. I think that with that, thank you, Mr. Marsh, for your presentation. I think that concludes the hearing for today, other than for the panel to discuss it and come to a decision. And as I said previously, you will be notified within 5 working days of the outcome of the hearing. So can I thank everybody for their attendance this afternoon, and we'll now go into private session. Thank you very much.